Ladies and gentlemen, please stand. Their Excellencies the Right Honourable Dame Patsy Reddy, Governor-General of New Zealand, and Sir David Gascoigne.
Haramaera, ngā manuhiri tuarangi, I runga I te kaupapa whakahirahira o te rānei e. Haramaera, haremaera, haremaera. Haramaera koutou, ngā manukuru ngā hāpori nei. Haramaera, haremaera. No maera.
Taia, taia. Taia te dei momo, taia te nā momo whakatairangatia. Whakamānawa tia te toki atu, whakamānawa tia te rau orongo. Oi whiwhi a te tohu, oi rawe a te tohu, oi tamau a te tohu, taumata rau tia te tohu, haumi e, hui e, tai ki e.
Kai aku rangatira e pai nei tēnā koutou. E tino ko ana aho, ki te hoki mai, ki te waipunamu, ki oti poti, ano hoki. Aku mihi nui ki a koutou katoa. My greetings to you all gathered here today. I'm really very glad indeed to be returning to the South Island, especially to Dunedin. I especially acknowledge the Honourable David Clark, Minister of the Crown, Dr. Royden Somerville, Chancellor of Dunedin University, Councillor David Benson Pope, our kuia Ranui Ngārimu, and our kaumātua, Professor Piri Shasha. Tēnā koutou. I'm particularly pleased to host my first investiture ceremony today in Dunedin. Today we're publicly acknowledging 19 honour recipients supported by their family and friends and recognising the contributions they've made to our country. As Governor-General, I have the authority and the privilege on behalf of Her Majesty, the Queen of New Zealand, to hold an investiture for her and to confer the honours to which each is entitled. Ladies and gentlemen, as each recipient is honoured, I invite you to join me in thanking and congratulating them for their service to our country. Catriona MacLeod will now summon the recipients and read a citation for each one.
Your Excellency, to receive the insignia of an Officer of the New Zealand Order of Merit, Mr. Rod Morris of Dunedin for services to documentary filmmaking, natural history and conservation. Rod Morris is a writer, photographer, filmmaker and naturalist. He was involved with Wild Track, a children's natural history television series for many years. He's directed wildlife documentaries for TVNZ, the Discovery Channel and National Geographic. His films have won awards at national and international film festivals. He's a freelance photographer specialising in New Zealand flora and fauna and has written on natural history and conservation for the school journal, New Zealand Geographic and Forest and Bird. He's produced more than 40 natural history books and numerous field guides. In 2011 and 2012, he campaigned to stop mining on the Denniston Plateau. More recently, Mr. Morris has collaborated on an initiative to teach refugees settling in Dunedin about New Zealand's nature and outdoors. Dr. Christine Roke of Auckland for services to sexual and reproductive health. Dr. Christine Roke has worked for and held positions of leadership with family planning for more than 40 years. As the organisation's national medical advisor, she led the clinical workforce and interacted with the media. She's taught at the organisation's partner projects in the Pacific. She was the visiting consultant for the International Planned Parenthood Federation to Western Samoa and Tonga, and the medical specialist for a family planning project in Vanuatu, Kiribati, and Tonga. She's published several papers on contraception and spoken at conferences and workshops in New Zealand and overseas. As chair of the New Zealand Sexual and Reproductive Health Educational Charitable Trust, Dr. Roke has overseen the Diploma of Sexual and Reproductive Health, an important qualification for doctors wanting to work in this field. Your Excellency, to receive the insignia of a member of the New Zealand Order of Merit, Ms. Rosalie Goldsworthy of Palmerston for services to wildlife conservation. Rosalie Goldsworthy has been involved with wildlife rescue for more than 20 years. Her particular focus has been in helping to save hoiho, yellow-eyed penguins, from extinction as manager of the charitable trust Penguin Rescue at Katiki Point Historic Reserve, Moraki. As a result of her efforts, the reserve is now one of the best places in the world to observe yellow-eyed penguins in the wild. She's made various contributions to penguin symposiums and has collaborated on scientific papers, helping to inform and educate others on how to save penguins. Ms. Goldsworthy has contributed at the national level to wildlife bird rescue and has provided guidance to wildlife veterinarians. Mrs. Daphne Hull of Alexandra for services to tourism and recreation. Daphne Hull was a founding member and chair of the Otago Central Rail Trail Trust. More than $2 million was raised under her leadership for upgrading bridges, culverts and surfaces, the addition of toilets and shelters, and the development of promotional materials. She remains a trustee and has been the Trust's representative for related projects, including the restoration of the Clyde Railway Station and work with the Central Arts Society on the annual Arts on the Trail event. Mrs. Hull was a key driver of the construction of an underpass to extend the trail from the railhead building under the State Highway to the Clyde Township. Mr. William Moran of Queenstown for services to the state, sport and youth. William Moran was employed with the Treasury from 1986 to 2016, including as Deputy Secretary, Strategy, Change and Performance. He's been a strong advocate for involving New Zealanders in the policy process. He's chairperson of Sport New Zealand and High Performance Sport New Zealand, deputy chairperson of Otago Polytechnic, and a director of Youth Town. He sat on the board of New Zealand Football and chaired the organising committee for the 2015 FIFA Under-20 Men's World Cup. He was a member of the FIFA organising committee for 2 Confederations Cup tournaments. Mr. Moran co-founded the Play It Strange Trust, a youth initiative to foster songwriting and live music performance. Mr. Tom O'Connor of St Andrews for services to seniors, local government and journalism. Tom O'Connor is an author, journalist and political commentator. He's former president and vice president of the Grey Power New Zealand Federation. He's published 6 books with a particular focus on New Zealand's Māori and military history. He writes a weekly history and political commentary for the Waikato Times and is currently writing a history of the Waimati RSA. He represents the St Andrews, Southburn, Otago ward of the Waimati District Council. He's a former chairman of the St Andrews Residents Association and a civil defence warden. Mr. O'Connor was communications officer with the Department of Conservation and served on several acclimatisation societies and fish and game councils. Mrs. Anne Roger of Dunedin for services to women. Anne Roger is a member of the National Council of Women and was president of the Dunedin branch. She represented the Dunedin branch on the Dunedin Forum for Non-Violence, facilitated the Towards a Non-Violent Society Forum, and was a member of the NGO Coordinating Committee for the Beijing World Conference on Women. At Catholic Social Services in Dunedin, she established a birth support group for young mothers and co-facilitated a program for women raising infants alone. She initiated a group to address issues for grandparents bringing up their grandchildren, which is now a nationwide service run by Presbyterian Support Services. Mrs. Roger has held numerous voluntary executive and committee roles. Mr. Evan Smith of Christchurch for services to the community. Evan Smith was a founding member of Canterbury Community's Earthquake Recovery Network, CanCERN, an umbrella organisation of Christchurch residents groups. As engagement manager, he formulated rules and processes for CanCern and created the Community Engagement Charter. He helped establish and coordinate the River of Flowers memorial events. He co-founded the lobby group Wider Earthquake Communities Action Network, We Can. He also co-founded Avon Otakaro Group, Wider Earthquake Communities Action Network. Avon, which advocates for the Otakaro-Avon River Corridor residential red zone to be turned into a city-to-sea multi-purpose river park. Mr. Smith is a member of Eastern Vision, a group of community leaders who facilitate community involvement in the regeneration of the eastern flatland suburbs. Mrs. Janice Tofia of Dunedin for services to education. Janice Tofia has worked as a teacher, principal, advisor for the Ministry of Education, and reviewer for the Education Review Office. She was principal of Forbury School in South Dunedin, where she actively supported underprivileged children and their families and improved the school's performance. The school roll doubled during her time as principal. She incorporated Te Reo Māori in her classrooms and introduced an initiative to provide healthy lunches for students, and she frequently offered personal support to students. She's now a facilitator in culturally responsive practice with the Otago University Education Support Service. Mrs. Tofia has volunteered as treasurer at Knox Church in Dunedin for 7 years. Your Excellency, to receive the Queen's Service Medal, Mr. Donald Curdy of Ashburton for services to cycling. Donald Curdy has been the Tynwald Cycling Club's Junior Club Development Officer and was its longest-serving committee member. He was the club's delegate to the Mid-South Canterbury Cycling Centre and the Tynwald Family Support and Recreation Centre. He's organised social and competitive cycling events. He is convener of the Tynwald Cycling Club's Social Wheelers. He's organised the Free Whiz Wheelers Family Evening of social track cycling, obtaining sponsorship from local businesses and personally providing food, refreshments, prizes and vouchers. Mr. Curdy has contributed to maintenance of the velodrome, undertaking lawn mowing, painting and safety monitoring. Ms. Joyce Kolk of Tuatapere for services to conservation. Joyce Kolk has run roadside cleanups and organised 4 major cleanups in Fiordland and Stewart Island. She procures stores, pre-cooks meals and caters for volunteers during cleanup operations. She arranges sponsored items and organises transport logistics with companies, as well as securing funding and donations for the operations. She's involved with running mustelid traps down the Wairahiri River, as well as a trap line on the Hump Bridge track to Port Craig. Ms. Kolk is a trustee of the Southern Coastal Charitable Trust and was an administrator of the South West New Zealand Endangered Species Charitable Trust. Mr. Pauli Ma'afu of Gisborne for services to the Pacific community. Pauli Ma'afu co-founded the Pacific Island Community Trust to assist Pacific Island migrants in Gisborne with immigration and to find sustainable employment. He regularly hosted migrants in his home, established a homework centre for migrant youth, and organised annual Pacific events. He negotiated with the Gisborne District Council for land to use as a community garden. He advocates against family violence and established Men for Change, Tautai Tangata, and a men's fellowship. He provides translation assistance for community agencies. He sits on the Kaiti School Board of Trustees and was a founder of the Tongan Wesley Methodist Church in Tairauwhiti. Mr. Dugald McTavish of Palmerston for services to conservation and the environment. Mr. Dugald McTavish is a geohydrologist and water engineer. He started the Dunedin branch of Oxfam Water for Survival, which fundraises for water supply and sanitation in developing countries. He helped form the Waitaki First Society and Lower Waitaki River Management Society. He initiated Sustainable Dunedin City and the Hampton Community Energy Societies. He helped establish the Wise Response Society, a coalition of academics and other NGOs that advocates planning for approaching natural resource limits. As National Secretary, Mr. McTavish has helped build the Society's national network, organising seminars and workshops, and helping prepare its submissions to councils, the Environment Court, and Parliament. Ms. Jan Pentecost of Rangiora for services to the community, particularly seniors. Jan Pentecost is National Secretary for the Grey Power New Zealand Federation. She's chaired the Election Strategy National Committee and been co-chair of the National Advocacy Committee. She serves on the Membership Committee and is co-chair of the 50+ National Advisory Group. She is secretary and co-chair of Grey Power North Canterbury. She held the roles of secretary and chair of the Kaiapoi Borough School Committee. She was secretary of Canterbury School Committees Association. Ms. Pentecost was involved with the American Field Scholar Student Exchange Scheme as secretary and chair of the North Canterbury chapter. Mr. Neil Price of Kaiapoi for services to the community. Neil Price sat on the Kaiapoi Borough Council and, following amalgamation, the Waimakariri District Council. He instigated the purchase of the iconic Kaiapoi schooner MV Tuhoi and established the MV Tuhoi Kaiapoi Rivertown Trust to manage ownership. After the MV Tuhoi was wrecked, the trust was redesignated as the Kaiapoi Maritime Heritage Trust, where he remains a trustee and secretary. Mr. Price is president of the Kaiapoi RSA and has been chairman of Te Tohaka o Tuhaitara Trust, president of the Canterbury Justice of the Peace Association, and patron of the Kaiapoi Brass Band. Mr. Lindsay Rackley of Dunedin for services to broadcasting. Lindsay Rackley has had a long involvement in the radio broadcasting industry. He worked as a volunteer announcer on Radio Dunedin, previously 4XD, and then began his professional career with Dunedin station 4XO, which was the first commercial radio station in the South Island. For decades, he's continued to work closely with the Otago Radio Association, arranging for the volunteer announcers to provide their programs during the association's time slots on Radio Dunedin. He continued to work as an afternoon announcer until 2015. Mr. Rackley is a voluntary announcer and voluntary secretary of the Otago Radio Association. Mrs. Edith Smith of Ashburton for services to conservation. Mrs. Edith Smith is a member of the Royal Forest and Bird Protection Society Ashburton branch and has served as secretary and chair. She's the chair of the Ashburton Community Conservation Trust, formed to administer the 11.5-hectare Harris Scientific Reserve. This involved negotiations with the council, co-writing a management plan, and managing the planting and maintenance of more than 10,000 native plants. She was a member of the Environment Canterbury's Mayoral Forum Steering Group, which developed the Canterbury Water Management Strategy. Mrs. Smith was also the founder and coordinator of the Ashburton Breast Cancer Support Group. Mr. Graham Smith of Tapanui for services to the community and theatre. Graham Smith undertook a range of projects with the JC chapter in the 1960s and 70s. He and his wife published the book Tapanui Turns 100 in 1976. He was secretary of the building committee for the West Otago Community Centre, part of the group that formed the West Otago Theatrical Society in 1982, and president of the society. He has had a high-level involvement in almost all Tapanui theatre productions. He served on the Presbyterian Church Board of Managers and the Property and Finance Committee. Mr. Smith is founder and chairman of the West Otago Blokes Shed. Your Excellency, to receive the New Zealand Antarctic Medal, Professor Pat Langhorne of Dunedin for services to Antarctic science. Professor Pat Langhorne is New Zealand's foremost sea ice scientist with a specific focus on ice physics and has been travelling to Antarctic on research visits for more than 30 years, primarily through the New Zealand Antarctic Programme in the Ross Dependency. Professor Langhorne was a key researcher on an experiment examining the strength of sea ice as part of the Sea Ice and Southern Ocean Processes program in 1985, the research results of which scientifically supported the use of sea ice runways for large aircraft, a vital aspect of New Zealand Antarctic operations. In the 2000s, she twice convinced Antarctica New Zealand to allow scientific teams to winter over at Scott Base, and her three-person teams undertook research on sea ice formation in situ during the entire winter seasons. In 2015, she took up leadership of the sea ice observation component of one of New Zealand's national science challenges, the Deep South, seeking to determine high-latitude climate impacts on New Zealand. She's had a long and successful record of bringing together international scientific teams to work in the Ross Sea region and has supervised PhD and master's students who've gone on to contribute to Arctic and Antarctic science. She's published extensively on the mechanical properties of sea ice under cyclic loading and its breakup by ocean waves, on the accretion and properties of frazzle ice beneath the McMurdo fast ice, and other aspects of sea ice and ice shelves. Professor Langhorne chaired the International Association for Hydro-Environment Engineering and Research from 2008 to 2014, during which time she was Chief Editor of the Cold Region Science and Marine Technology volume of UNESCO's Encyclopedia of Life Support Systems. Your Excellency, the investiture is concluded.
Ladies and gentlemen, an investiture ceremony is the most important event that I hold on behalf of Her Majesty, the Queen of New Zealand. It allows me, as Governor-General, to recognise and thank an extraordinary group of people on behalf of all New Zealanders. By using their talents to make ours a better society, whether by service to their communities or by their leadership in diverse fields of endeavour, or their commitment to excellence in their field of expertise, our recipients have set a fine example to others, encouraging them in their own endeavours. To the recipients, it's been a privilege to hear your stories today. You've demonstrated determination, commitment, and compassion in your daily lives. In your own way, each of you has helped make New Zealand a better place. In some cases, your influence and the positive impact of your work has extended beyond our shores. The diverse ways in which you have served our communities brings to mind the words of Dr. Jane Goodall when she said, "Whatever we do makes a difference, but we have to decide what kind of difference we want to make." Your contributions have enriched the cultural, social, and economic fabric of Aotearoa, New Zealand. Please wear your insignia with pride, knowing that your communities appreciate and value your work and are inspired by your example. On behalf of the Queen of New Zealand and all New Zealanders, I congratulate you on your achievements and I thank you for your service to our country. Kia ora hui tātou katoa. Ladies and gentlemen, that almost brings to a close the formal part of today's ceremony. But before we break for refreshments, can I ask you to stand and join me in singing our national anthem in Māori and in English?